The handcuffs were too tight. I remember that. Of all the things to remember from the moment my life ended, I remember the cold steel biting into my wrists, the way the officer twisted my arms behind my back with practiced, indifferent force, and the sound of my daughter screaming. Not crying, screaming. A high, piercing, 8-year-old shriek that cut through the chaos of the grand ballroom at Claridge's like a scalpel. "Daddy, Daddy, where are they taking you?" And I couldn't turn my head to see her. I couldn't see my Sophie. I was being dragged backward toward the gilded doors, my feet slipping on shattered crystal, my face paralyzed in a mask of shock. And the last thing I saw before the doors slammed shut was Marcus Fairfax standing at the podium, his hand still pointed at me, a single tear tracing down his cheek for the cameras. And then, in a flicker so fast no one else caught it, the corner of his mouth twitching upward into a smile of pure, gloating triumph. He had just destroyed me in front of 400 people, framed me for a crime that would send me to prison for 5 years, and stolen my entire life. And he was enjoying it. If you're hearing my voice right now, if that image just burned itself into your brain the way it's been burned into mine for over a decade, then I'm asking you from the deepest place in my soul, please hit subscribe. This is not a generic outro request. This is me, James Ashcroft, telling you that what comes next in this story is darker, deeper, and more triumphant than you can possibly imagine, and you will want to witness every single twist of what happened after those doors slammed shut. Please subscribe now. Now let me tell you who I was before that night. 15 years ago, I was the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Ashcroft Fairfax Biotherapeutics, based on the Cambridge Biomedical campus. We were the most promising gene therapy company in the United Kingdom, and Marcus Fairfax, the man who just had me arrested in front of 400 people, was my business partner and my best friend. We met at Trinity College, Cambridge. I was a working-class kid from Manchester on a scholarship, permanently out of place among the public school accents and inherited wealth. Marcus was the opposite, Eton-educated, effortlessly charming, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they were the most important person in it. But we shared a single, obsessive vision: curing Salicline disease, a rare pediatric neurodegenerative disorder that traps children in their own bodies before killing them, usually before their 10th birthday. He was the front man, the CEO who could raise £50 million in a single meeting. I was the scientist, the one who lived in the clean rooms for 18 hours a day, who whispered to the cells under my microscope like a father whispering to a sick child. And after 12 years, we did it. We developed neurovents. The results were miraculous. Children who had been locked in frozen bodies began to lift their heads, to speak, to laugh. We were heroes. The Times put us on the cover. Money flooded in. I trusted Marcus with my entire being. He was my best man at my wedding. He wept when I told him my wife Helena was pregnant. Every Friday night, 2 glasses of Macallan 25 in his office, the city lights of Cambridge below us, talking about the future. He was, I believed, the brother I never had. About a year before the gala, I started noticing things. Subtle things. Whispers in the corridors that stopped when I walked past. Analysts who used to smile at me suddenly finding the floor fascinating. Micro-expressions I couldn't quite decode, flickers of fear, of pity, there and gone in a blink. I confronted Marcus in the underground car park one evening, the sodium lights casting harsh orange pools on the concrete. He turned to me, and for one split second before the mask slipped into place, his face held an expression I had never seen before, a cold, appraising flatness, the look of a man calculating a sacrifice. Then it was gone, replaced by a warm, exhausted smile. "James, you look terrible. You need to trust me more than ever right now. There are forces at play, board politics, investor nonsense, that I'm shielding you from. Just focus on the science. Let me handle the wolves." He gripped my shoulder, but his hand felt different, colder. The pressure was just a fraction too hard. I wanted to press him. I wanted to tear through the company's data systems that very night. But I didn't, because the alternative was unthinkable. So I buried myself in the science and told myself the darkness was in my head. It wasn't. The night of the gala, the MHRA had just granted accelerated approval to Neurovents. Claridge's grand ballroom was packed with 400 people, investors, journalists, politicians, and most importantly, the families of the children we had treated. The air was thick with perfume and champagne, and the electric hum of a miracle being celebrated. I spotted Marcus in a corner, half hidden by an ornamental palm, deep in whispered conversation with two men in dark suits. Their posture screamed law enforcement. Marcus was gripping one man's elbow, his neck muscles corded with tension, his body angled to create a bubble of secrecy. Our eyes met across the ballroom, and he gave me a look I have dissected a million times since: sorrow, terror, and underneath it all, a dark, glittering triumph. A heartbeat later, he nodded at me, almost imperceptibly, a tiny, sad inclination of his head, and then he walked to the stage. He stepped up to the podium. The room fell silent. The spotlights embraced him. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a night of miracles." Applause erupted. I felt a swell of pride despite the cold dread in my gut. Then his voice dropped. "But miracles cannot be built on a foundation of lies." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus produced a tablet, connected it to the massive LED screens flanking the stage, and suddenly my own handwriting, my own signature, loomed over the room. Our internal audit team has uncovered something unspeakable. The primary endpoint data from our Phase III trial was manipulated. The safety profile of Neurovents was deliberately falsified. 7 children who received our therapy are fighting for their lives in intensive care units across the United Kingdom. 2 of them are on life support. The screams that erupted were not sounds of shock. They were sounds of soul-rending agony. Mothers wailed, fathers shouted. Champagne towers toppled, glass shattering like gunshots. I lunged toward the stage. This was impossible. I had verified every data point myself. The therapy was safe. It was safe. Marcus raised a shaking hand and pointed it directly at me. His voice broke with a sob so authentic I almost believed it. "The man responsible is the very man I trusted like a brother. My partner, Dr. James Ashcroft." James. How could you forge my signature on the safety authorizations? How could you threaten a data manager to stay silent? The faces in the crowd twisted into masks of hatred. A woman whose child I had personally comforted spat on the floor in my direction. And as the NCA officers grabbed my arms and wrenched them behind my back, Marcus locked eyes with me one final time. His back was to the room for just a split second, and I saw it. His mouth twitched upward, a fleeting, almost imperceptible grin, and his pupils dilated with pure, savage delight. The expression of a predator who has just sunk its jaws into the throat of its prey. He mouthed a single word at me: "Mine." Then the door slammed shut, and I was gone. Now pause, take a breath with me. What I just described was the moment my life was stolen. But it was also the moment a slow, intricate machine of reckoning began to tick. The deepest, most intense parts are still ahead. If your heart is racing or your fists are clenched right now, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. Because what follows, the trial, the prison, the complete disintegration of my soul, and the long, meticulous climb back into the light, will change the way you think about justice forever. Please subscribe. You will want to see how this ends. The week that followed was a concrete box beneath the Crown Court, lights that never turned off, air that smelled of bleach and old despair. I didn't sleep. My mind was a broken record, that word, that smile. Mine. It didn't take a genius to understand. With me destroyed, Marcus assumed total control of Ashcroft Fairfax. He became the sole surviving hero, the betrayed partner bravely cleansing the company. The board rallied behind him. The public worshipped him. And the evidence he presented to the Crown Prosecution Service was a masterpiece of forensic fraud. My forged signature, falsified lab access logs showing me entering the data center at 3 a.m. on nights I was home with my wife. A fabricated email trail where I supposedly threatened a junior analyst named Timothy Wexler, who had conveniently transferred to Zurich 2 days before the gala and was utterly unreachable. It was a web so airtight that even I, knowing my innocence, could find no seam. The trial was a blur of agony. My barrister, a Queen's counsel I'd paid a fortune for, went pale when he saw the prosecution's evidence bundle and started talking about reducing charges. But the worst part was the public gallery. Every single day, the parents of the sick children sat there, holding up photographs of their little ones in hospital beds, tubes and wires and blinking machines. They didn't shout. They just stared with a grief and hatred so pure it felt like radiation. And I understood. They believed I had poisoned their children. I couldn't even blame them. The moment my soul shattered, though, was before the verdict. During a pre-trial hearing, I caught a glimpse of my wife Helena and our daughter Sophie through a small reinforced window in the hallway. Helena was kneeling, gripping Sophie's shoulders, her face pale and streaked with tears. And Sophie looked up at her little face contorted with confusion and terror, and I read her lips through the glass. "Is Daddy a bad man? Are they going to put Daddy in a cage?" I doubled over in my handcuffs and wept. Great heaving sobs that tore at my throat, because I knew in that moment that no matter what happened next, the image of her father as a monster had already been planted in her heart. That was Marcus's true crime, not the stolen company, not the false imprisonment, the theft of my daughter's love. I accepted a lesser charge on my barrister's advice. If we fought every count against that mountain of doctored evidence and that gallery of heartbroken parents, I would spend my life in prison. Reckless endangerment and fraud. 5 years. HMP Dartmoor. A grim, granite Victorian monstrosity crouched on the bleak, windswept moorland of Devon. The moment the iron gates clanged shut behind me, the world of color, sound, and hope just drained away. The air was a perpetual fog of stale sweat, boiled cabbage, and suppressed violence. The walls were the color of old bruises. My cell was a 12-by-8 stone tomb with a tiny barred window that looked out onto nothing but gray fog. The cold was the worst, a damp, penetrating, bone-deep cold that no thin gray blanket could stop. It seeped into my thoughts. I stopped speaking. I stopped reading. I became a ghost in a gray tracksuit, shuffling through the gray landings, my mind a silent, looping theater of Marcus's micro-smile. Helena served me divorce papers 3 months in. A single handwritten note: "I can't let Sophie carry your shame. Don't contact us. Don't write. Disappear." Friends I had known for decades, fellow scientists, Cambridge contemporaries vanished. Phone calls unanswered. Letters returned unopened. The newspapers were a daily knife in the chest. "Baby killer scientist begins sentence." The world had tried me, convicted me, and erased me. By the end of the 2nd year, I had given up entirely. I lay in my bunk for 16 hours a day, not moving, not thinking, staring at that gray rectangle of sky, willing my heart to simply stop. I was ready to stop existing. I was a husk waiting for the wind to carry me away. And then on a Tuesday morning in April of the 3rd year, the speaker crackled. "Ashcroft James, you have a visit." I hadn't had a visit in over 2 years. I shuffled to the visits hall, sat down behind the scratched perspex partition, and lifted my eyes to see a woman I had never met before. She was small, bird-like, with mousy brown hair in a severe bun and thick spectacles that magnified her eyes. She wore a rumpled beige cardigan. Her hands were shaking so badly her knuckles were white. She leaned close to the glass, her breath fogging it, and spoke in a high, quavering whisper. "Dr. Ashcroft, my name is Margaret Pemberton. I was a junior data archivist at Ashcroft, Fairfax. Nobody ever noticed me. I was part of the furniture. 2 weeks before the gala, I was running a routine integrity check on the backup server. I found a hidden encrypted partition. Inside were the original unaltered Phase III safety logs, the real logs. Dr. Ashcroft, the therapy was safe. The data was immaculate. There were no severe immune responses. No patient was ever in danger." My heart, that dead, forgotten organ, gave a single, violent lurch inside my chest. The altered data Mr. Fairfax presented was injected into the system 2 full weeks after the final data lock, using a backdoor admin account cloned from your credentials, originating from his executive terminal. I downloaded everything onto an encrypted drive. I hid for 3 years in a rented cottage in the Lake District, paralyzed by fear. But my mother died last month, and on her deathbed she said, "Margaret, a life lived in fear of doing the right thing is not a life at all. So I drove here. I have everything, everything you need to prove your innocence." She slid a folded piece of paper through the gap at the bottom of the partition. A safety deposit box number and a code at a bank in Exeter. The drive was there. The originals. I took the paper and something cracked open in my chest. Not a hot, raging fire of vengeance. A cold fire. A slow, patient, meticulously controlled burn. I wasn't going to just clear my name. I was going to dismantle Marcus Fairfax piece by piece, in full view of the world that had condemned me. The remaining 2 years were no longer a sentence. They were preparation. I devoured legal texts on corporate fraud, SFO regulations, forensic accounting. I wrote letters to a young pro bono solicitor named Rebecca Shaw who looked at Margaret's evidence and said, "This is a nuclear bomb. Let's aim it correctly." The Serious Fraud Office quietly reopened the case. They investigated in secret for a year, and I built a plan, a multi-phase architecture of justice. When the gates of Dartmoor swung open on a gray October morning, I didn't walk out a broken man. I walked out an architect. I spent 6 months in a tiny rented room above a garage in a Cornish fishing village, rebuilding my body on the wind-scoured coastal paths. Then I executed. Working with Rebecca, the SFO, and a handful of the country's most respected investigative journalists, we verified everything over 4 months. The venue for the reckoning was chosen with poetic precision, the very same grand ballroom at Claridge's, on the 6th anniversary of my destruction. Marcus, at the peak of his power, billionaire, philanthropist, the CEO who restored faith, was hosting his annual benefit gala, completely unaware his empire was a house of cards. I walked in through the grand front entrance in a charcoal Savile Row suit, my stride unhurried. The collective gasp was a physical wave. Security moved toward me. I raised my hand. I wouldn't do that if I were you. In precisely 45 seconds, every major news network in this country is going to broadcast a segment that will make you very glad you kept your hands off me. The LED screens flickered. The BBC News theme filled the ballroom. We interrupt this program with a story of catastrophic corporate fraud and an extraordinary redemption. New forensic evidence has emerged that completely exonerates Dr. James Ashcroft. The true perpetrator, according to sealed charges filed by the Serious Fraud Office, is Marcus Fairfax. I watched the blood drain from Marcus's face in real time. His skin turned the color of old parchment. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, a pitiful, solitary echo of that symphony of destruction 6 years earlier. His eyes darted around the room with wild, trapped desperation. The micro-expressions were a symphony of collapse, rapid blinking, flaring nostrils, tightening lips. And then, as SFO officers emerged from the crowd and surrounded him, the final, soul-deep slackening of every muscle in his face as the mask fell forever. He looked at me across the room. There was no smirk this time, only a hollow, bone-chilling terror, the terror of a man who has just recognized the monster in his own reflection. I didn't say a word. The world did the talking. He was let out in handcuffs, his empire evaporating overnight. I was publicly exonerated, my name not just cleared but gilded. But the only thing that mattered came 3 weeks later, a letter delivered to my new flat in Cambridge, written in a child's uneven but careful handwriting. "Daddy, Mummy says you were never a bad man. Can I see you? I miss you. Love, Sophie." I wept again, but this time the tears were of release, of homecoming. I did see Sophie and Helena. The rebuilding of a family is slow and fragile, but it is real. Marcus Fairfax is now serving a 22-year sentence. I don't think about him much anymore. The cold fire has burned itself out, and in its place is a quiet, steady warmth. I have my work. I have my daughter. I have my peace. And so I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for walking with me through the shattering glass, the stone walls, the cold moorland mist, and out into the light. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And I genuinely want to know, if your best friend, the person you trusted most in the world, did this to you, what would you have done? Would you have found the strength for patience, or would the rage have consumed you? Leave a comment below. I read them all. Thank you.